Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, can I analyze the case of Takaya Young? Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I will put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. First, I'll look at the background of this case, move to the timeline of the incident, then offer my analysis. This case takes place in 2023 in Westerville, Ohio, which is a northeastern suburb of Columbus. It involves a woman named Takaya Young. She was born on August 1, 2002. Takaya had two sons, ages 6 and 3, and was pregnant with a daughter. She was due in November 2023. Now moving to the timeline of the incident. On August 24, 2023, 21-year-old Takaya Young visited the Kroger supermarket on South Sunbury Road in Westerville. She was in a Lexus sedan with no license plates. She parked in a space reserved for people with disabilities, but she did not have a permit visible on her vehicle. As Takaya was in the Kroger supermarket, two police officers from the Blendon Township Police Department were assisting a motorist in the parking lot. At the time of making this video, the officers have not been named by the police department because they are considered to be victims of a crime. In statements made by the police, they are simply referred to as Officer 1 and Officer 2. Officer 1 was helping a motorist who was locked out of their vehicle. Officer 2 arrived on the scene to assist Officer 1 after having dealt with an automobile collision. At about 6:20 p.m., as the officers were assisting the motorist, a Kroger employee approached Officer 2 from behind. The employee pointed to Takaya Young, who was sitting in the Lexus sedan. The employee informed Officer 2 that Takaya had just stolen alcohol from the supermarket. Officer 2 approached the Lexus and started talking with Takaya. He repeatedly ordered her to get out of the vehicle. She refused to comply with his lawful commands. Instead, Takaya rolled her window down a little bit and asked, "For what?" Officer 2 explained to her that a Kroger employee had accused her of stealing. Takaya responded by saying, "I didn't steal blank." As Officer 2 and Takaya were talking, Officer 1 walked over to the Lexus. He positioned himself in front of the vehicle. Officer 1 then drew his pistol and ordered Takaya to exit her vehicle. She did not comply. Instead, she put the vehicle in gear and turned the steering wheel to the right. She drove forward, striking Officer 1. He was pushed back a few feet. At one point, for just a moment, both his feet were off the ground. At this time, Officer 1 fired a single round from his pistol. The round penetrated the windshield of the Lexus and struck Takaya Young in the driver's seat. Officer 1 was able to get off the hood of the car as the Lexus continued to move forward. The vehicle traveled about 50 feet as officers chased it on foot, yelling commands. It collided with the brick exterior of the supermarket and came to a stop. The police broke the window and removed Takaya. The officers rendered aid, used their radios to call for support, and were assisted by an emergency room physician who just happened to be in the supermarket parking lot. Takaya Young was transported 6 miles to Mount Carmel St. Anne's Hospital, where she died from the gunshot wound. Her unborn daughter also died. Now moving to my analysis. Here are my thoughts on a few areas that stood out to me in this case. Item number 1. Takaya Young was described as fun-loving, goofy, and as a prankster. She had been arrested previously for theft and fleeing from the police. She was mostly raised by her grandmother, but at the time Takaya was killed by the police, her grandmother had a protection order against her. On August 20, which was 4 days before the shooting, Takaya showed up at her grandmother's home and the police were notified. When they arrived, Takaya was already gone. A misdemeanor charge of violating a protection order was filed against her. It was the second time Takaya had been charged with this crime. Item number 2. Takaya was accused of shoplifting alcohol from the Kroger supermarket. In addition, based on body camera video, it appears as though Takaya committed crimes against the police officers. The police said that Officer 1 was a victim of attempted vehicular assault because Takaya hit him with her vehicle. Officer 2 was a victim of misdemeanor assault because his arm was inside the vehicle when Takaya accelerated. The police believed that other people had stolen alcohol at the same time as Takaya, but those shoplifters fled from the scene and escaped justice. It's not clear if Takaya knew those people and was part of an organized theft effort, or if the other thefts were just a coincidence. If she knew the shoplifters, maybe she fled because she did not want to be the only person arrested. Like she thought to herself, they got away, I deserve to get away too. It seems suspicious that there was no license plate on Takaya's vehicle and that she parked without authorization in a space reserved for people with disabilities. It's almost like she was trying to facilitate a quick escape after allegedly stealing alcohol. Item number 3. In looking at the body camera video, it's clear that one of the police vehicles was actually parked between the entrance to the supermarket and the Lexus that Takaya was driving. If Takaya was shoplifting, why did she walk right past a police cruiser to get to her car? Most shoplifters would be discouraged by seeing the police outside a store they were stealing from. They might walk in a different direction or drop the merchandise and run away. This supports the idea that Takaya was impulsive and reckless. She was not afraid of the police. This idea is further supported by her reaction after being confronted. Instead of complying with the commands given by the police, Takaya refused to exit her vehicle. At one point, she even asked the question, "Are you going to shoot me?" One could argue that Takaya believed the officers were powerless to stop her, like she was challenging them to use deadly force. She believed that she could drive away, even striking an officer, and the police would not be inclined to defend themselves. Takaya did not appear to be afraid of the officers, even though Officer 1 was pointing a firearm at her. Most people would be frightened and discouraged by having a gun pointed at them. Even if they believed the officers were acting in an unjustified manner, they would still be concerned about the shooting part. Item number 4. Takaya could have taken steps to avoid being shot and killed by the police. For example, she could have refrained from engaging in theft, if in fact that's what she was doing, not removed the license plates from her vehicle, parked legally, complied with the commands from the police, and not attempted to run over a police officer with her vehicle. These tactics are pretty well known. They should not have been foreign to Takaya. For example, on any given day, the vast majority of citizens refrain from running police officers over with their motor vehicles. Most people realize that doing so would likely lead to an undesirable outcome, like getting shot by the police. Item number 5. On the body camera video, Officer 1 can be seen placing himself directly in front of Takaya's vehicle. This is a precarious position considering the situation. He could have protected the other officer from another position. There was no reason for him to take the risk of being struck by the vehicle. Prior to the vehicle moving, Officer 1 can be seen pointing his gun at the windshield. He's holding the pistol in his right hand and for some reason puts his right thumb in the air. This could indicate a lack of training. Officer 1 can be seen mounting the trigger with his right index finger as if he intended to shoot in that moment. This also occurred before Takaya started driving away. Officer 1 placed his left hand on the hood of the car, almost like he was going to hold the car in place in defiance of the laws of physics. When considering these actions, one could argue that Officer 1 made a bold decision which restricted his options. He was not going to permit Takaya to pull her car out of that parking space. It was either her or him. She could comply or he was going to shoot her. Takaya wasn't going to surrender, and neither was Officer 1. Item number 6. Right before Officer 1 fired his weapon, his position at the front of the vehicle changed a little bit. Takaya turned her vehicle to the right, and Officer 1 drifted closer to the driver's side of the vehicle. Officer 1 could have simply rolled to his right and removed himself from danger. It wasn't like his whole body was on the center of the hood and he was trapped. Rather, he was standing off to the driver's side. Now moving to the last item, Number 7. Do I think that Officer 1 was justified in shooting Takaya Young? This is just a theory, my opinion. I think that both Takaya and Officer 1 made mistakes during this confrontation. Takaya should not have tried to run Officer 1 over with her vehicle. She was applying lethal force by moving her car forward. It's clear that she believed the police would not actually shoot her, despite her application of lethal force. This was an unreasonable belief. As for Officer 1, he should not have placed himself in front of Takaya's vehicle. This put him in danger and restricted his options. Even after he was in that bad position, he could have rolled to his right to avoid being injured by the vehicle. This solution would have protected everyone. With all this in mind, I believe that Officer 1 was technically justified in the shooting, but as far as morality, the shooting was unacceptable. Officer 1 placed himself in danger and had other options outside of shooting. He exercised terrible judgment and does not appear to have the temperament to be a police officer. There is no reason he should be proud of his behavior. Now moving to my final thoughts. This case represented a battle of will between Takaya Young and Officer 1. They were both willing to do anything to win. Takaya was counting on the officer being afraid to shoot her, as if he did not have that level of commitment. Ultimately, she fatally underestimated the officer's determination and overestimated his level of restraint. Those are my thoughts in the case of Takaya Young. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be informative. Thanks for watching.